Welcome back to another web development video where I show you how to make modern websites using HTML5, CSS3, and a little bit of JavaScript. I'm going to continue into some of our deep dive videos into different components or layouts for websites. The hope with this series of videos, I guess is what you would call it, is that you would learn the basics of how to put together actual sections. So you should be able to take what you're learning in each of these deep dive videos and be able to both create multiple types of each component, like different layouts, but you should also be able to combine those components together to be able to make a website with just modern sections and layouts. So that's the hope. In this one we're going to cover a hero section, and then we'll do one with text and one without text. So let's just jump right into our HTML, and I'm just going to do a header. I don't know, it could be a section, could be anything. And inside that I'm going to have actually I'm not going to have anything. The first one is just going to be it's just going to be a section with no text. It's just going to be a full screen image. This would be a hero image. It's very rare probably that you're going to do something with just an image, but just so you know, we're going to attach a class here of hero, and that's really all the HTML that we need. The rest of it we're going to do in the CSS. So we come down to our CSS and we say hero, and we need to attach a background image, and that's going to be a URL value. And I'm just going to pull in something from the Unsplash source. So it's sort of a low-level API for Unsplash. It's https source.unsplash.com, and then we'll give it a size. So that's like a 16 by 9 ratio, and then we can also attach a specific keyword that we could search for. So let's say let's just say city. So it's going to pull in an image from this source. The image is going to be 1600 by 900, and it's going to be using only images with the keyword. It's like you went to Unsplash and searched for city. It's just going to pull a random image from there. And with our background image we need some other background properties. So we need background position of center and background size. We want it to cover the entire space, and I'll just go ahead and put a repeat on there of no repeat. And then we'll have to do a height for our image. So it's going to be 100 VH, which is viewport heights. So if you took the height from here to here and you sliced it into 100 sections, it would take up 100 of those. If you only need to take up 60 or 60%, you can see that it only takes up a little more than half. So this is a good way to control the height, and it's based on screen size, your viewport height. So as the screen size changes, this is actually going to change. So it's a dynamic unit that you can use. That's great for background images, and we're just going to do a full screen image, so that's 100 viewport heights, or essentially 100%. And you can see as we go out that it's allowing the center of the image to stay centered. If we didn't have this, then you could see that it makes the image over to it just sort of pushes the image off the page. It doesn't make sure that when it resizes from the center. That's the default. And also, just to see what cover does, this is just our full image here. You can't see everything because we have this 100 viewport heights, but if we did 200, then you'd be able to see that it's our entire image, right? And if we take everything off, let's see, it gives us, yeah, you can see when we do that, that there's a repeating background. So you know, it's just one of those things where you're just trying to set everything so that it takes up the full amount of the space, right? And so that's what all of these things do. Each of these things help us to take the full amount of the space. Now we have 200 here. That's not what we want. We just want 100. Okay, so that brings it down. Also doesn't make it very pixelated or anything. And you can make this anything. You can make this 2600 by, I don't know, 1200. Like, it can be anything, any size that you want. It's still going to make it full bleed. So top or vertical and horizontal. Because this is a block level element right here, we don't need to specify a width on here because it's assumed that the width is 100% of whatever the container is. And right now, because this is the container is the body, then it's 100% width of the body. So for us, there's no need to declare a width on here. But if for some reason your container that has this image is not it has some sort of constraints on it, you might have to deal with a width on there. Okay, so this is our basic hero section, or a full screen image. If you had two of these, let's say, you can see what happens if you put two of them back to back. Oh, that was a building in Chicago. Alright, so if we have two of these, you can see that they each take up 100 viewport heights, right? So when we go down, you know, I can't scroll anymore because it's taking up 100 viewport heights as well. And again, both images are they're covering the background. So you can see that when you get to the end of this image, it's only taking up as much calculated space as the viewport height, and once you get to the end of that, it stops. And so then your next section would begin. So sometimes you might have a section on here. Let's say it takes up half of the width of half of the height of the page, and then you have another section down here that begins with text or a video or whatever it is, and then, you know, you're only taking up half of the page up here, but you still get the properties of it covering, so that when things change, you can see that when it gets too big for it to just be its regular size, then it starts to grow. The image sort of starts to grow because it's trying to cover all of the space here. Okay, and this background position center just determines where does it grow from. When it has to grow, where does it grow from? You can see that it centers everything in the middle. If you wanted to grow from the top, you can see that it keeps the top in view, and the bottom starts to get cut off because it's growing. It's sort of centering itself from the top. See how that works? If you wanted to do the opposite, then it would make sure that it kept the bottom in view and it grows from the bottom. So one of the things to think about here is, what is the focal point of the image? Is the focal point the center? Is it the left? Is it the right? Top or the bottom? Do I need to put a percentage so that it you know, right here is where where I want it to grow from? So these are sort of things you need to think about. Art direction. If you have two faces here in the middle, directly in the middle of the image, you would want it to be from the middle, right? So that you can still see the two faces. If you have someone's eyes at the top, then you would want the top to always be in view because you want the image of the eyes to be able to show. Okay. I don't know if I have a what's the name of the site that I was working on here. So this is a site I was just doing. It's about to go live. Let me see. So this image here, you can see that her eyes are sort of toward the top of the screen, right? This one, the focus is in the center. This one, the focus is more on the top than it is on the bottom. Here the focus is sort of through the center and the top. Here definitely the focus is the center. You want to keep their faces there. And here, you know, the focus is just sort of generally down the middle. But when you go to this one, I made sure to set that for the top. So this is a background image in action, and this is set to the top because we wanted to keep her eyes on the page. That's the main part, right? Is to keep her eyes there. So we have it here, and when we go into our settings here, we can see that the background position is center and top. Okay, so you can do, you know, horizontal or x-axis, and also a vertical or y-axis. So you can decide left, you know, bottom left, top right, center top, center bottom, however you want to do those things. But you can see that this is the exact same thing that we have here, you know, essentially the same thing. So this is a header in action. It's got some other elements to it here inside that will cover, you know, how to put elements inside of your background image container. But this is just a good example of what it's like to keep everything to the top, and you have to choose. So let me show you. Oh, come on, Chrome, you can do it. So when you do this, and we're in our responsive tools for Chrome web developers, you can see that it's scaling it. Once it starts to scale, it's scaling it from the top, and it's keeping everything to the top, so that when we come down here, you can see that the image is here, but as the image gets too, it's already starting to scale right there. So when the image gets too big for its container, then it doesn't scale from the center. Otherwise we would have just a picture of her neck, and that's not what we're going for. We want to make sure that we have her eyes there as much as possible. So a little bit of art direction, and it's always just sort of keeping everything at the top. If you find yourself, you know, on a really large 4K type screen, you know, let me get out that far, then still, you know, it's not the best look, but you still do get her eyes. You could even push her up a little bit, or just make this container a little bit taller when you get out to those sizes. So we have it at 350 right now, but you could simply just make that a taller image, and it's going to show you more of the background when you get out to a large screen like this. So there's a couple of different options that you can do in order to control, you know, what's showing in the background for your background image. Same thing here. We could, if we want to see more of the picture, we could simply make our section taller, and then we would be able to see more of the image. Okay. All right, so that is a background image in the wild, so to speak. Okay, let's get on to our second one. Let's just make this go away, and we'll have our second image here showing. And what we're going to do is we're going to say hero, and we want to put some text over the image, and so that it overlays the top of the image. So we'll come in here, and I like to use an inner div, and so I'm just going to say div with a class of hero inner, and I'll show you why I do this in a minute. I've documented it in other videos, but I'll show it here as well. So let's just put an H1, and that's going to be some great headline here, and we'll save that. And now we have our image over top of our background, because our background is actually on this outer container, and this is inside of that container. And because this is not it's not an image like where we put an image tag in, so it doesn't take up any space in the actual flow of the document. It only takes up space as it's related to this hero section. So however tall this hero section is, that's how tall our background is going to be. So the image itself is not determining any part of the flow of the document. It's sort of coming along with this hero image. So putting this inner div puts it right inside of this section. It's as if this section has no, if you took all this away, then it would just be this section here. The section would be there. Color of, so you can see that our section is still there. If we put a background image on it, it's still 70 viewport heights. And then this is here. It's just that before we have, instead of a background color, we have the background image. So, oh, boy, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so instead of that background color, we just have this background image. Once you put some content inside of here, if you don't expressly give it a height, it's going to take on whatever the height is of your content. Okay, so whatever you do with this content, or however much you have, that's going to determine the height. So this is the sort of default or the auto setting for the height. If you want it to have an expressed height, then you need to actually express it in the section. We're going to get a little weirdness here. You see this gap? That exists because on every H1, every headline element, H1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there is a little bit of margin on the top and bottom. I don't believe there's any on the sides, but they do put some, every browser puts a little bit on the top and bottom. So the way you can do that is, let's just give this a class so we can target it directly. We'll just call it the hero headline. So if we come down here and we say hero headline, and we just do we just clear out the margin. We say margin of 0, then we're going to get rid of this little white space up here. Now there's also no margin on the bottom, so if you want anything between this headline and maybe a sub headline or a button or something like that, then you're going to need to add that margin in, or allow the sub headline margin to just be the gap between the two. We also want to color this white. So we'll do it like that. And what else do we want to do? I think that's it for now. So I don't really like that this is up here at the top left. What I really want is it for it to be centered in the middle of this section. This is pretty common. Let's actually make this, change the font weight. Can we do 100? What does that do? Okay, I don't think that does much of anything. It's probably the same as 400. Okay. So change the font weight here. It makes it a little bit more difficult to read, but I'll show you how to deal with that in just a minute. So what we want to do is we want to center this vertically, and we want to center it horizontally. Now the reason that we have the inner div is for this centering action. Now if you just have one element like this, it's probably not such a big deal. It's a little bit of overkill, but normally I have a headline, there's a subheadline, there's an image, I mean not an image, but a button, or sometimes two buttons that you're trying to get all centered into the page. And when you do Flexbox on multiple child items like that, it gets to be a little more difficult to just deal with. It's easier to just put a hero inner div and then center that one div and then do what you're going to do inside of that hero inner div. So that's why I choose to do that. I did a video on that about using the inner div, and there's lots of different reasons that I do that, and this is one of those reasons. So I'm going to come to our hero inner. Let's put it here. And I'm just going to call it display flex. And flex is not going to do anything to it at this point. But if we justify the content to the center, then it should move it to the center. And if we align the items to the center, then it should perfectly center our text in the midst of this section here. Okay, so we're running into an issue. So the height of our hero is good, but the height of our hero inner is only as tall as this. So the height is only as tall as our headline. Basically, we took the margin off. If we put that margin back on, you would see that it goes down a little bit, right? So it's perfectly centered vertically. It's just that our section is not tall enough to match this this outer hero section. So the way that we can deal with that is you just come to your well, the problem is I put it on the wrong one. Let's go back. You got to put it on the hero. Sorry about that. I was going to show you something, but I won't do that. The flex container needs to have some sort of height, right? So whatever the height is, it's going to flex the content to the center of the width, and it's going to flex the content to the align item center, which is, you know, by default the vertical. If you don't have a height, it's going to do all those things, but it's, you know, this is as tall as it is, so it's aligning it vertically. There's just not very much there to align it vertically too. But if you had, you know, if you did 30 viewport heights, let's say you just wanted to do a page header or something like that with a title, then it's going to center it perfectly in the vertical, but your section is only 30 viewport heights tall. If you did it at, you know, 400, then it would center it there too, but it's just that it's 400 viewport heights. Okay, so let's leave it back at 50 or 70. Yeah, let's leave it back at 70, and we want to make our hero the flex container. And then inside of our hero, there's one thing that's being flexed. That's this hero inner. So whatever is inside of your hero inner is going to get centered as one lump. Okay, so that if we didn't do that and we just had this here, and then we get rid of this, you would see the exact same thing, because we only have one element in here. It's a block level element. So if all you have is just one singular headline, then you can just leave it like this. But as soon as you add in, let's say, an H2, so as soon as we put in an H2, you can see now that it's flexing these two items. So then you'd have to come down and you have to do flex direction of column, something like that. But if you come and you just take these two elements and you put them inside of here, then because all we want to do really is to center these things. It'll keep these two things stacked. These two elements here will be stacked, you can see, but it's going to center everything on the page. Now once you get this sort of thing, you can see that we're left aligned. Maybe that's a look you're going for, maybe not. But then you could come to your hero inner and you could text align everything to the center, so it'll center all of your text. You could come to your H2 and you could also get rid of the margin there, and so it'll pull everything up together a little bit more neatly, and then you have to give it maybe some color. Okay, and also maybe the font size a little smaller, so we just pull things down a little bit. It's by default, I guess, 1.5. So can make it a little smaller that way. So now you have this perfectly centered headline, so that even as this is growing, your headline and your subheadline are staying here together. Now you run into some weird issues here as you get onto a mobile screen. So maybe you want to add a little bit of padding on nothing on the top and bottom, and 1.5. I find 1.5 is good on the sides, and so it just sort of gives you a little buffer on the sides there. So it never really, once it gets to that buffer, it starts to, still gives you a little bit of space up here. Okay, so this will be a pretty typical phone size, like right around in here, and maybe you're going to want to play around with the spacing between them. But essentially you're getting this nice single element with a centered headline of text. Now, if you want the text to be left aligned, because maybe that's the look that you're going for at a certain size, like when you get out here, or this text is a little bit longer, it would be easier to read. If you go more than a line, it's going to be easier to read if it's left aligned. And so maybe that's really the look that you're going for. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing. So when you have a sort of a light image like this with the light text, it's helpful to have this image a little bit darker, or to be able to manipulate a gradient so that you can see the text a little bit easier. You can do before or after pseudo elements and that kind of thing. I prefer to just put it right here on the background. So I'll show you a little trick that I use all the time. So instead of background image, we're just going to say background. And I'm going to get rid of this background image. And we're going to say background. We're going to use a linear gradient first. And then after that, we're going to do our URL. So we'll just copy and paste our URL here. We'll put that in there. We want to use the same image. But over top of that, so the way this background works is the first thing is on the top. The last thing is on the bottom. So whatever you sort of compound together, and you can connect them or chain them using just a comma. So whatever we chain together, this first element is going to be the topmost element, and then the second and down below. So the last element is on the bottom. So we come here to our linear gradient, and linear gradients take multiple properties. We can look it up on MDN. Anytime you have a question about a CSS property or JavaScript or whatever, I would suggest going to Mozilla Developer Network, and if you just type in MDN with whatever it is, you're probably going to get right to the page that you need in the docs for CSS or HTML or whatever it is. So linear gradients. So you can see that the most basic gradient is it takes two values here inside the parentheses. So the first value is the top, and the second value is the bottom. So it goes from this color to this color over the height or the width of the image, whatever you choose. You can see here that they've turned everything, but now they have three colors. So they have the blue, and then this central sort of pale white yellow, and then it goes to this orange. And so you're moving, that's like adding a new stop if you're familiar with gradients in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever. So you're adding a stop by adding a new color, and then here you're getting lots of different colors, and you're getting them in different angles and that sort of thing. Same thing here. You're getting them, these are RGBA colors, and you're getting them at different sizes and widths. You can see here that it shows you how the gradient starts and ends. You can use percentages, you can use CSS colors, you can use hex colors. So there's lots of different things, RGBA. So we are just going to do sort of a basic type of thing here. You can determine where the, like what is the angle, you know, sometimes in an image editing program you can change the angle to be horizontal or vertical or from the corner. You would determine that here by whatever degrees. That's where it's going to start, right? So it's going to start from a 45-degree angle, you know, this way, from the red to the blue. So that's, you know, just one of the things that you can do, multiple color stops and etc. So the way this is going to help us is that instead of doing two colors for our image, we're actually just going to do one color, and it's going to move from one side to the other. So you're going to wind up with one property here, or one value here, but it's going to give you a nice opacity. And that's what I love about the gradients, is because they give you an opacity that you can work with. So first we're going to start with just a black overlay, and I'll show you why. Okay, so that's a full opacity black. Okay, so underneath is still our image. Remember, this is on the top of the image. And if we go to our debugger and we look at the this section, okay, I don't want to be out quite that wide. Let's not do that. Okay, so this is just like the size of an iPad on its side. What are we looking at? We're looking at our black here. Okay, so this is the element. You can see that our background is the linear gradient with the URL underneath. Now if we click on this color picker, it brings up our color. You know, this is our current color. This is the hex for that color. We have an opacity slider here, or you have, you know, just sort of a hue slider. If we deal with our opacity slider like this, then you can see that because we have our top image, or I mean our top color here is the one that's selected. This is the bottom color of our gradient. You can see kind of a cool way of how that gradient works. So now it's a transparent color up here, so everything is showing, and then it fades down into a black. Maybe that's the style that you're looking for. I'm not sure. Not the style I'm going for. What I want to go for is just a darkened image. And so let's just do this one. So 006, if you want to know how that translates into RGBA, you can see it here. So it's like a 40% opacity. The color is 000 and the opacity is 0.4. If in your Codepen, if you're using SAS or SCSS, you can do the RGBA declaration here. We're using vanilla JavaScript, so I mean vanilla CSS. So we have to use these new transparency elements. So if we just put a 6 at the end, then we should get our transparent 40% color. And you can see that it sort of darkens the background image so that this headline pops a little bit more. If you want it to pop even more, you can take this font weight off, and so you get that bold color there. And there are just a couple of different ways, you know, that you can deal with trying to get the background image the way that you want. Now if we wanted, it's going to be an extreme example, but we could put a color stop here in the middle, and what that'll do is sort of give even more attention and weight to this. But let's say we just want it to have an opacity of let's say 80%, so 00 with the lowercase c. So we can just come in and put our lowercase c, and it's going to darken it a little bit, but it's not so noticeable that it's just not as noticeable, especially in this image here. But it does give us a little bit more jumping out as opposed to this. So this is where it would be normally, and this is with the center sort of helping us out in the center of the image. So just learning how linear gradients work can help you. Sometimes if I wind up with a headline down at the bottom, what I want is I want the top image maybe to be transparent so that I see more of the image, but as I get down to the text, I want to put a little bit of a gradient down there just so that I can see it. So let's see, I can just say transparent, I think. Can I do that? Yeah. So I can just do transparent so there's no color up here, but as it goes down the screen, then I get a little bit more color. So even down to the extreme of that color that we just took, right? So you can see that if you had some text down here, if we just took our, instead of aligning our items to the center, we do flex end, and we align the items to the bottom of that section. You can see that there's how it sort of pops off the screen, but then up here you get a nice image. You can see more of the image, and then it just sort of distorts everything down here a little bit with the color. So hopefully that shows you some of the things that you can do with this background image with the linear gradient, and you can see that it's one uniform color, and that's exactly what you want. And it doesn't matter what size you're at, you just get this nice image over the background. You could choose any color you want there. You can, if like I said, if you're using SAS, then you can do RGBA colors where there's a color and then an opacity, and that's super helpful for being able to sort of mask the background a little bit and give you exactly what you need. I believe you could also do some sort of filtering over this, but I'm not sure. Like if you wanted to do a blur or something, I'm not totally sure about that, but something to look into. Extra credit. All right, hopefully this helps you. A little bit of a deep dive into a hero section with text over the top, and sort of how the height works with the viewport heights, and also how the inner sectioning works, where you want to align things to your section height and width. And again, this is our full image here. So you can see that it's a little bit darker, but not too much, but the headline really pops off, right? You can see even at a bigger size how the headline just really sort of jumps out. And obviously at this size you would want a larger image, a larger text size, or you want to shrink up the height of this section. All right, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section down below. I'll get to them as quickly as I can, sometimes same day, sometimes it's a couple days. But I love to hear, what are your thoughts? What are you struggling with? Is this helpful? Whatever you want to share is fine with me. Are there issues with the audio or the video? That's cool. I want to get better at doing these videos for you. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and you'll get notifications, especially if you click the little bell by the subscribe button. You'll get notifications when new videos come out. I tend to do 1 or 2 a week, and I really want to get into some of these deep dive videos like this to really help you to understand how things work. So when you're using this property and this value in the CSS, how is it changing? And then how is it changing in real time whenever you make a change to the value? And how to do little tricks like these background linear gradients and things like that to create a more modern looking website, because this is really just sort of a modern look with the background recessed a little bit and text over the top. And it would be just as simple to add a little button here, and now you have a full-fledged header for like a big hero image header for any website that is really quite easy to make and is very appealing as far as visually. All right, you can catch up with me on Twitter. My handle is @BrianHafferkamp, and I can't think of anything else right now. Maybe I'll be able to put a video together on Friday, maybe not. But stay tuned for more videos like this, where I'm going more in depth, and hopefully this is really helpful for raising up a new generation of front-end developers working with HTML and CSS. And if not, it's been fun for me. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.